it is such a pleasure and so humbling to be able to be with you on, if you can see how it's becoming morning here in Austin, Texas, in the United States, and I know it's becoming more evening around the world as you go. I've been asked to tell you a little bit about my story about growing confidence and preparing for contests. I want to start out with something that my daughter said to me. I have 8 children, and I am crazy about all of them, watching them grow, and they are very funny. One of my daughters came up to me, it was a couple of months ago, and she said, "Dad, could I please have $50?" And I said, $50? You have a job, you're working. Why are you asking me for $50? Well, a little later, her brother came and pulled me aside and said, "Dad, she asked for the money because she's trying to buy you and mom a, a Christmas present." So I sent her $100. So I tell you that story just to say, a lot of times you want to know who you're talking with. And I learned from that, I want to ask more questions. If my daughter comes up and says, "Can you send me $50?" I don't want to immediately say no. I want to ask, well, why are you asking for that? What are you going to do with that? Asking more questions. So I want to start out with you all of you beautiful, wonderful, my brothers and sisters. Could you tell me, on the little reactions, do a little hand raise, like, I'm going to do one, or maybe a thumbs up. So there's my thumbs up, right? If you could do a thumbs up if you are in the semifinals coming up in October.
Mr. Mike, the still club contests are going on. After the club contest is finished, then they will be sending semi-final. So it may be
Okay,
starting from next month only. Okay,
okay,
so
okay.
still people are
So
not ready.
so everyone right now is
Yeah,
currently
everyone trying. They are
in
trying to
contests.
participate. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, that tells me what I need to know. The other thing is I want to be able in our time together, I have several things that I can share with you, but the main thing that I want to do is be able to address and talk to you about what you want to know. So if you would I'm going to tell you a little story, but while I do that, if you would type in the chat what your questions, is there a question that you really hope gets answered today? And as I watch the questions scroll up on the chat, then as I go through my prepared remarks, then I can make sure that hopefully I'm answering the questions that you really had coming to this meeting here today. So as you're putting your questions into the chat, so I can see what you're most interested in today, I'll tell you a little bit about my speaking journey. It started when I was about 10 years old. I was part of a group that was a lot like a Gavel Club. It was a group of business professionals in the town that I grew up in. And I just wanted to be able to speak in front of other people. And so there were several of us that we got up and we told our stories and we talked about certain things, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much that I talked way too long. I just kept going on and on. I think originally they gave me 5 minutes. I think I spoke almost 15 minutes that first time. I just could not be quiet. I could not close my mouth. It was very fun. But what I discovered was that I went on way too long. I said a lot of ahs and ums and filler words to the point it was distracting. And I went off on tangents. I would start talking about this and I would think about something else and I would start going down different roads. So I had someone a little later in my life who said, Mike, I know a group that can help you fix that. There's a Toastmasters club right down the street, and you could go in there and work on these different areas that you struggle with. So I went to college, I went on and I worked for a couple of U.S. senators, United States senators, who are government officials in the United States. And I that was fun for a little bit, but then started another. I decided I wanted to do business full time, and I had always studied economics and finance. I wanted to do that business. I started giving seminars about finance, and that grew. Today, I have I still do some financial seminars. I do a lot of professional public speaking to companies, helping them build better teams and use speaking and seminars to build those beginning businesses. So I really appreciate the questions that you're putting in the chat. I can see a lot of these about how not to stutter in table topics, about speaking to prove a point, developing confidence. So all of these questions really help me. What I'll do is start along the lines of talking about building confidence and work in stories to hopefully answer your questions along the way. And then I want to give some time really just to focus in on questions. Because confidence is one of those things that can help us all. What gets us to stand in front of a group? Years ago, what really was great speaking was someone with good posture and speaking with a deep voice in beautiful, flowery language. But as I travel around the world and I see people giving TED Talks, TEDx talks, I see influencers who are speaking on stages to companies, and I happen to speak at a conference when there are other very high qualified, high paid speakers who are also speaking at that conference. What what really projects confidence and great speaking today is the ability to have a conversation in front of 500 or 5,000 people, coming across and being authentically you in that environment. And that takes practice, but it also takes mindset. So let's talk about some ways building that confidence that you can apply right where you are. It also helps you in school. It also helps you maybe get the job you want, or talk to the individual that you want to talk about. The first thing I would suggest to you in building confidence is recognizing that everything in life falls into one of two categories. There are only things you can control, or they are things you cannot control. And I would suggest that our confidence builds whenever we focus only on those things that we can control, and we get used to just being unattached or living with those things we cannot control. If you'd like to go back, somebody asked in the question, are there any good books that I would recommend? And hopefully I'll recommend several, because I love books and I am a beneficiary of lots of good books. But the first one I would recommend is a book by someone who lived thousands of years ago, who was the emperor of ancient Rome, Marcus Aurelius. He wrote in his journal every night. Marcus Aurelius wrote, and after he died, that diary, that journal was found, it was published and is now called Meditations. So if you were going to read one book, I might suggest you start with Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. Marcus, in that book, so many different times, talks about being being attached to things we cannot control, and that creates nervousness, that creates self-consciousness. It decreases our confidence whenever we're tied to things we cannot control. And if you think about it, it's a fool's game, because we're trying to do things, we're worried about things that there's no way we can control. It rests out here, and we're not able to do anything about that. And so, to the degree that we can separate ourselves from those things we cannot control and only focus on things we can control, then our confidence increases, our confidence raises. So, I'll tell you how this affected me in Toastmasters. I joined the Toastmasters International Conference probably 20 different times. I started whenever I was a young man. Now, you'll hear some world champions, they enter the contest once and they won in that very given year. They were very naturally great speakers. And if you are a naturally great speaker, that is great. And I applaud you. I was not naturally a great speaker. I had to learn how to become a good speaker. And I tried and failed and tried and failed and tried and failed. But the failure part, whether I won a contest or not, that's in that realm of things I cannot control. And I would tell you, if you are in this contest and you do not win, that's not something you can control. There are a group of judges that look at your speech every time, and those group of judges have different things they like and don't like. You could give the same speech one day to a group of judges here, and you could win. You could give the same exact speech another day to a different group of judges and not win, because this group of judges has something other than what you are saying, other than your type speech, that they like better. And it's a subjective world. There are races like track meets or cricket matches where you have two teams in cricket that now here's my disclaimer. I know zero about cricket. I assume that there is a score at the end of the game. I assume that one team wins and one team loses. That is an objective measure, that that a cricket team will either win or lose based on the score. Or when two people are running a race, then they you can measure who gets to the finish line first. That's an objective measure. In contests, you you don't know what the judges are going to pick. And so that's in the realm of things you cannot control. If you tie your confidence to something you cannot control, you're not going to increase in confidence. But if you consistently tie your confidence to things you can control, then your confidence rises. So I joined the contest 20 different times. I lost at some level many different times. And we came up, I went to the international semifinals in 2013, and I came in second. I was just one place away from going to the international finals. And then I got back to the international semifinals again in 2015. And I had been constantly writing on my mirror, I am world champion of public speaking 2000. I am world champion of public speaking 2001. I am world champion of public speaking 2002. And each of those years I lost and I lost and I lost. I finally got to the semifinals again in 2015. I was the last speaker. It was my favorite speech. And I did not even place. I didn't come in first, second, or third. and I was devastated. My confidence dropped all the way to the bottom. And I realized that my confidence was low because I was focusing on something I could not control. I gave the very best speech I could in that contest, but the judges did not like it as much as they liked three other speeches. I cannot control what the other judges liked or voted for. And so I switched. I started deciding that the only thing that would mean success or failure to me was, did I prepare as well as I could prepare? Did I try to serve the audience as much as I could serve? Did I focus on all the things I could control most? And that's what I would judge my confidence on, not whether I won or lost, because I could not control that. Did I prepare as best I could? Did I serve the audience? Did I have gratitude for the audience for allowing me to speak to them? And as I did that after 2015, my confidence soared and I won the World Championship of Public Speaking in 2020. For 18 years, I lost and my confidence was low because of that. But when I shifted to focus on things I can control rather than what I cannot control, my confidence soared, and that's when I ultimately won. So let's talk about you for just a minute. Let's think about all of you right now, you're in school. And if you're doing a writing project, a paper, you have to turn in a paper. You cannot control the grade that you ultimately get if the teacher thinks that that is an A plus or an A or a B paper. What you can control is how much you research, how many times you practice. Did you ask a parent or a mentor to read your paper and to give feedback? And if you do all those things, then the grade takes care of itself. But ultimately, if you don't get as high a grade as you wanted, your confidence can still be good because you focused on what you can control. Let's talk about a speech in Toastmasters. If you get up and you give a speech and you don't win a ribbon, or if you don't win in the contest, but you prepared as well as you can, then then your confidence can be high. What about an athletic contest? If you go out and you do all of the things that you can control, but you still don't win, the secret is you will win at some point in the future, and your confidence can be high because you are doing everything you can you can control. So here, what are some of the things that you can control? Number one is you can control your preparation. You can control your preparation. So everyone right now is in the contest. They're getting ready. Some of you will move forward. Some of you will win and go on to the semifinals in October. Many of you will not win this time. And if you don't, then what I would say is you can be writing for the next time. But your preparation, even right now, while no matter where you are in your speech, probably your speeches are already written. Probably you're practicing them. But I'll tell you what my preparation looked like as I was getting ready for contests in the year that I won the world championship. Our world championship is in August. The beginning contest started in January. I started writing two speeches because I had to have two speeches if I was going to go to the finals. I'd never been to the finals before, but I wanted to prepare as if I would be in the finals. And so whenever I lost the year before, I started writing. So in September, October, November, I was writing my speeches. And the speech that took me all the way to the semifinals, we were driving back from a province or state. I live in Texas in America. There's a province in called Arkansas that is a little west and north of my home. We were driving back from that. My wife was driving because she gets motion sick. So I was reading a book, and in reading a book, it talked about the author was talking about how he had a friend of his had an experience, a challenging experience as a young man. And it reminded me of a good friend of mine named Maria, who went through some challenging surgeries whenever we were in high school together. And I started thinking about that story. We got home and I immediately went into my computer and I wrote the entire speech out. So I would suggest that you always should be writing. If you take 15 minutes a day, even right now, even today, just take 15 minutes and write something, write a story, write what you think about. If you can't write anything or can't think about anything to write, then write about that. And if you're always reading, then there are always thoughts that are coming up that you can be writing about. So, writing 15 minutes a day, that's one of the things you can control if you write 15 minutes a day. What that does is that gets the creative centers of our mind, of our brain constantly going and constantly moving. Even if you aren't writing, even if you're writing your speech for next year, even if you're writing a speech to give to your local civic club, just 15 minutes a day. Everyone can do that. If you can't write 15 minutes a day, just write 10 minutes a day. But some writing that gets that flowing. So I wrote out my entire speech. Now I speak at about 114 words a minute with pauses. I love pauses. So a 7-minute speech is 800 words for me. When I first wrote out that speech, it was 1,500 words. So I knew I had to cut it back. If you write out your entire speech, you know if you're going to go too long or too short, and you can go in and play with the language, play with words. But write out your speech. I wrote out my speech the entire way. I cut it back to 7 minutes, which is 800 words for me. And then I created a mental outline. And I want to tell you the way I create mental outlines if you are thinking about that. The way that I create mental outlines is I think about walking into my house in the front door, and my introduction is something that's sitting right there inside my front door. So if I'm telling a story, let me see, if I'm telling a story about going to Chennai, India, and I want to start the speech by saying, I got to Germany and my flight was canceled. Then in my mind, I open my front door and there is a plane with a big flag of Germany sitting right inside my front door. Now that's a ridiculous scene, right? But it's so ridiculous that I remember it. Then my first point, I turn to my left, and that's where our dining room table is. And so I might say I had to be rerouted through Dubai, and I got to spend 18 hours in the Dubai airport. And I met this really interesting man in Dubai. So in my mind, I have him seated at the first place at that table. So do you get the idea? Whenever I'm giving the speech, then in my mind, I walk into my front door and there's a picture of a plane with a German flag. That reminds me that's how I want to start the speech. And then I turn to my left, and seated at the first spot in my dining room table is the man I met in Dubai. And that reminds me of that story. But I've already written it all out. I already know what the language is. So first I write it all out, then I build this mental outline. And my mental outline is a picture of my first point inside my room, then a picture of my second point at my dining room table that I want to say. The different supporting points are pictures in my mind going around my dining room table. Then I go mentally into my kitchen and standing around, there are pictures around my kitchen. So when I'm giving my speech, I'm mentally just walking through my house, seeing these pictures that I have placed mentally throughout my house, and it helps me remember my outline and I can speak without notes. Shot my confidence way up. I build that mental outline. I can stand in front of my audience and I don't have to have notes, and it's my house. So I remember it's the visual of where everything is. So point number one, write out the speech so you know how many words. Point number two, build your mental outline. Point number three is practice, practice, practice. So when I went into the contest, I started the contest in January at the club. And if I was going to make it to the final, I would give that speech in August. I had two speeches, remember, because I needed two if I was going to go to the finals. So every morning I get up and I get ready and I drive to work. Once I had written out my speech and I had my mental outline, I would get in my car, getting ready to commute to work. And the very first thing I did is out loud, I would run through my speech. And then I would run through the second speech. My commute to work, depending on traffic, is 20 minutes. It could be as much as almost an hour. But the very first thing I did, certainly enough time to go through two 7-minute speeches. I would do that in the morning, and then when I got in my car to drive back home in the afternoon or evening, the very first thing I would do is run both those speeches. By the time I got to the finals at the World Champion of Public Speaking, or when I was at the semifinals, I was I was highly confident because of my preparation. I had said out loud, given those speeches each at least 500 times. And so I knew my material. I knew it like the back of my hand. Not only had I given it 500 times, I would purposely put myself in positions where there was distraction. I would go walk on a trail downtown and I would speak it out loud, and people would walk by looking at me because I'm just speaking out loud and I'm being animated. Sometimes people would bump into me, but what it gave me practice was if there were distractions that happened, then I could still be confident in giving that. And then I would hear something, I would read something. I was still writing 15 minutes a day. I would have a turn of phrase that I liked better than I was already saying, and it became a feedback loop. Once I got something better, I would go back in, put it in my speech, I would change my mental outline, and I would rehearse it, rehearse it, rehearse it, practice, practice, practice. So your preparation is the very first thing that you can do that is inside your control. The other thing I'd like to tell you is, before we stop for some other questions, is that having gratitude, a your mindset, is the other high point of confidence. When I lost all those many years, my goal had been to win the championship. My goal had been to win. So if you think about it, I was focused on myself. I heard someone a long time ago, a great speaker, say, beginner speakers focus on themselves. Average speakers focus on the speech, but expert speakers focus on the audience. Expert speakers focus on the audience. And when I realized that when I had this goal that I would win the championship, I was focused on myself. I was keeping myself in that beginner type speaker. And so after 2015, what I decided was I don't care if I win the world championship anymore. What I care about is providing a speech that helps someone in my audience. And so every time I would go into a contest or stand up to speech, I actually did it today, but right before, right as you all were introducing me, I just always say a prayer to say thank you that I get to say something that helps at least one person in this audience. And I'm so incredibly grateful that I get opportunity to try to share like that. What it does is it puts me in a place of gratitude where I get to be focused on the audience and I get to be focused on hopefully helping someone in that audience. It gets my mind off myself, which oddly enough does increase my confidence because I'm not self conscious, right? I'm other conscious. A third thing that is well within our control is having a really strong vision. There is an admiral named Admiral Stockdale, and during a war, he's an American admiral. He was flying over the enemy territory and was shot down. He was put in prison, and later on, an author was asking him, "How did you continue to thrive even in a prison camp elsewhere?" And he said, well, the reason I was able to survive was I was not an optimist. What? I was able to survive because I was not an optimist? Wait a minute. How does that increase confidence? He said, well, the optimists said, it's okay, we'll be out by Christmas. And Christmas would come and go, and they would still be there. And then they'd say, it's okay, we'll be out by Easter. And Easter would come and go, and they'd still be there. And they died of a broken heart. He said, the way I was able to survive was I knew for certain someday I would get out back to my family, but it was not today. And so no matter how hard things got, I would survive and focus today because I knew without question someday I would get back to my family. So, and if he can do that in extreme circumstances like that, you and I can certainly have a vision. And that vision may be to go to college. That vision may be to build a business. That vision may be to win the world championship of public speaking. And that is fine to hold that, but to hold it lightly. There's a lot of psychological research that says increasingly that if we approach a goal like that, say, it would be nice to be the world championship, to be the world champion in public speaking, but I'm fine. It's no big deal if it doesn't happen. I believe it will happen one day. But if it doesn't happen today, that's okay. I'm going to prepare, I'm going to be grateful, and I'm going to keep my vision.